My name is Helen, and for most of my life, I believed that memory was the only anchor we truly had. Without it, we drifted like ghosts in a fog. When I first woke up in a London hospital, the fog was so thick I could barely breathe. A dull ringing filled my head, and the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like angry insects. Doctors whispered, nurses hurried past, but no one told me the truth right away. It was only when my gaze fell to the corner of the room that I realized my world had shattered. A little girl sat on the plastic chair, her wide eyes fixed on me. She clutched a worn stuffed rabbit in her hands. "Mom," she whispered. That word cut through me sharper than any knife. I didn't know her. I didn't know myself. They told me I had been in a coma after a violent car crash. They told me the little girl Charlotte was my daughter. They told me my husband, Paul, had died in the accident. But memories are treacherous things. They trickle back in fragments, shadows, flashes, whispers. And soon, I realized that the fragments didn't add up. Nights in that hospital were the worst. The air smelled of bleach and stale food, and the corridors groaned under the weight of silence. It was then that I first saw them, the figures. At first, I thought they were hallucinations from my medication. A man in the corner, his face hidden in shadow. A woman weeping softly near the door. A small child crouched beneath the bed. They weren't alive, but they weren't gone either. Their eyes followed me, empty yet demanding. I screamed. No one else saw them, but they were real. I knew they were real. Part 2, The House of Secrets. After weeks of therapy, I was discharged. Charlotte and I returned to our family home, an old Victorian terrace in the heart of London. The house groaned with age, its walls steeped in silence. The first night back, Charlotte refused to sleep in her room. She said there was a woman standing by the window, whispering her name. I brushed it off as trauma. Children invent monsters when they can't face the real ones. But as I walked past her bedroom later, I froze. The window curtains fluttered, though the glass was closed tight. And for a second, I swore I saw a pale face staring back at me. The house was alive with whispers. At night, doors creaked open by themselves. Objects shifted. Once, I found muddy footprints leading up the stairs, child-sized, though Charlotte had been asleep beside me. And then the dreams began. I saw my father, a stern and distant man I hadn't spoken to in years. His hands were soaked in blood. He stood over a crib, his eyes hollow. I woke up gasping, sweat clinging to my skin, my chest heavy with a truth I couldn't yet face. Part 3, The Kindred. Determined to uncover the truth, I searched through my father's old belongings. That's when I discovered the hidden journals in the attic, dusty leather books filled with his handwriting. What I read froze my blood. My father had been obsessed with seances, with speaking to the dead. He wrote about a kindred, of souls trapped between life and death, bound by guilt and violence. He believed our family was cursed, haunted by generations of sin. And then came the names of children. Dozens of them. I remembered vague stories of missing children in our neighborhood when I was young, dismissed as urban legends. But my father's journal suggested something far darker, that he had lured them, sacrificed them, bound their souls to our home. I slammed the book shut, ball rising in my throat. And that night they came. The figures from the hospital. The children, their faces pale, their eyes pleading. They whispered my name. They whispered Charlotte's. They weren't here to hurt us. They wanted me to remember. They wanted me to see the truth. Part 4, Bloodlines. The deeper I dug, the more horrifying it became. My father hadn't acted alone. My mother had known. My family had kept secrets for decades, covering up crimes buried beneath our very home. And me? I wasn't innocent either. Fragments of memory clawed their way back. I remembered being a little girl, standing in that same attic, hearing muffled cries from beneath the floorboards. I had hidden. I had covered my ears. I had pretended it wasn't real. The guilt consumed me. Now the spirits demanded justice. The visions grew violent. My father's ghost appeared nightly, dragging his bloodied hands across the walls, whispering, "Finish what I began." Charlotte grew pale, withdrawn. She said the children followed her everywhere, tugging at her clothes, begging her to set them free. The house became unbearable. The air thickened with decay, the stench of rot bleeding from the walls. At times, I thought I heard my husband's voice, calling from the shadows. But Paul was dead, wasn't he? Or had he known the truth too? Part 5. The Final Revelation. It was the night of the storm when everything came undone. Rain lashed against the windows. Thunder rattled the old house. Charlotte screamed, and I ran to her room. The walls were alive, hands pressed through the wallpaper, faces stretching against the plaster, mouths open in eternal screams. The children were everywhere. And in the center of the room stood my father's ghost, his hollow eyes locked on me. "You are one of us," he hissed. "The blood is in you. You cannot escape." The floorboards split open. Beneath, I saw them, tiny skeletons, bones stacked like firewood, their hollow sockets staring up at me. The truth hit me like a blade. Paul hadn't died by accident. He had discovered the truth about my family, and he had tried to expose it. My father's followers, his kindred, had silenced him. The crash had been no accident. And me? I had always been part of it, whether I admitted it or not. I screamed, clutching Charlotte to my chest. The spirits swarmed us, their cold hands brushing against my skin. But instead of pulling me under, they whispered, "Break the chain." With trembling hands, I struck a match. I set the journals ablaze, the fire spreading through the attic, devouring the walls that had hidden so much horror. The children's cries rose, then faded into silence.